I'm only allowed 50 pounds, and I don't want to pay for an extra suitcase this time. When I've gone in the past, I've always paid for extra suitcases, but not this time. So I'm collecting some Bibles, eyeglasses, pens and pencils, and you know those string backpacks you get when you go to a conference? Sometimes they give you, and it has the name of the company. If anybody has any of those are awesome, and the kids love them. So I had a question, too. Is there anybody else here who's a missionary today? Nope. Okay. So first of all, since this church doesn't know me well, I've only been here a couple years, I'm going to give my testimony of how I came to Christ. I am the firstborn of 4 daughters. My mom always had one of us girls say the prayer before we ate a meal. We always said, "Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest. Bless this food prepared for us. Amen." But that was the extent of my Christian training. I would not say it was a happy childhood. My self-worth was non-existent, and I was a very shy little girl. Luke 18:15 through 16 says, "And they were bringing even their babies to him so that he could touch them. But when the disciples saw it, they began rebuking them. But Jesus called for them, saying, 'Permit the children to come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these.'" When I was 5 years old, our next door neighbor invited me and my sisters to go to vacation Bible school. I probably would have no memory of this, except that on the final day, I was sitting on this little wooden bench in the very, very back row with my class. And they gave the altar call, just as they had done every day before, I suppose. But on that day, at 5 years old, I prayed the prayer and accepted the Lord. I didn't raise my hand, and I didn't go forward, so they never knew because I was too afraid. But I knew that something had changed in my life. So we should never underestimate the salvation of a child, the calling of the Holy Spirit on young lives. My father was in the army, and we left soon after this to live in Europe for 3 years. We had a children's Bible that was given to us by a Jehovah's Witness. I can remember reading and rereading all those Bible stories. They were fascinating to me. And as an adult now, I know that God was calling me, creating in me a curiosity to know him. I also had a praying grandmother that never hurts. Her name was Grace, and I'm named after her. In the 6th grade, a friend of mine invited me to go to church with her. She stopped going after a couple of months, but I continued to attend because there was a really cute boy there. Truth be told. So I was desperately hungry for love and acceptance, and I found it in this little church that went 20 to 30 miles out of their way at their own expense to embrace a silly little girl who needed rides to church for years. They invited me into their homes, and they loved me, and they brought me life. I literally would get out the church directory, start in the A's, go all the way through, call every single person, and if none of them could pick me up, I'd start over. And I would just keep going until I found somebody to come get me. And I lived 20 to 30 miles from everybody, and they would have to come all the way out and get me. But they could, now I just think, oh, that was terrible that I did that. But that was, they loved me, and they came and got me from 6th grade until I was 16 and could drive on my own. So that was a lot of years of Wednesday night, Saturday night youth meeting, Sunday morning church, Sunday night church, and sometimes to save themselves some gas, they'd invite me for lunch on Sunday afternoon, I think. When I was 19, an interest in Africa was born after hearing a missionary speak one Sunday. I watched documentaries and checked out books on African subjects. When I was 25, I had to settle for a 3-month mission trip to Honduras because I was unable to raise enough money for the African mission trip. I believed God was calling me, and I tried to obey by making my own way there several times. I even wrote a letter to Oprah and asked her to take me with her when she went, but she never responded. Just like Abraham and Sarah, I struggled to make it happen, but thankfully the Lord kept closing those doors until the right time. Proverbs 19, 2 through 3 says, Also it is not good for a person to be without knowledge, and he who hurries his footsteps errs. The foolishness of man ruins his own way, and his heart rages against the Lord. I've seen young Christians eager to serve, rush ahead, defending their actions by saying, God's calling me. We must remember the story of Joseph. He told his brothers of his dreams, of God's call on his life, long before he should have, long before God was ready to bring his call to fulfillment. Then he endured much opposition and persecution before he could see those dreams come to pass. When we try in our own strength to answer his call, we fail. We could even become angry with God. After all, Lord, I'm only trying to do what you asked me to do. We must hold on to the call and press into his presence to know his perfect timing. The Lord knew I wasn't prepared. So I took the long route, just like the Israelites. It took me 40 years to go to Africa. I got married and had 4 sons and a daughter. It was not a healthy marriage, and after 25 years, we were divorced. At the same time, the church that I had attended for 20 years fell apart, and all of my church family scattered. I was very alone. I had no self-worth. I was scared, and in the middle of all this, I had a major surgery. But with 3 teens still at home, I had to find the strength to support them. Through it all, it was a very dark and stressful time. God was faithful to build me up, to prepare me, and to supply my every need. The Lord knew I needed to go through lots of hard stuff before I would be ready for Africa. I needed more life moments to share with others. In 2013, a missionary from Africa spoke at our church, and at the end of the service, I knew that my time had finally come. I remember sitting in the back row because I snuck in late because I wasn't going to go, and just crying my eyes out, and everybody's looking at me like, what in the world's wrong with her? But it's because as the service wore on, I knew that God was saying, now is the time. Now you're going to go. And I was 60, and so I thought, well, I'm not going now. I'm just too old. I can't go now, you know. I was alone. My children didn't need me. They'd moved out. And even though I didn't know how I would go, I didn't know what I would do, and I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that I was finally being sent. The following day, I met with my pastor, and he put me in touch with the Nazarene Mission Board. I was attending a Nazarene church at that time. I took a year to prepare, sold my house, which I had just bought, so I didn't really get any money from it. And all my household belongings, my kids came with a U-Haul and took most of them. I sold my car. In September of 2014, with all my worldly possessions in 3 suitcases, I left for a land where I knew no one. I thought I had the funds enough to last for 1 year as a volunteer missionary with the Nazarene Church, but I stayed 5.5 years because of one miracle after another of God's provision. My position was office assistant to Reverend Paul Mtambo in Zambia. He is the field strategy coordinator, and he's responsible for all the things in the Nazarene churches for the countries of Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. When we say yes to God's call in our life, it's not easy. It's even scary. But not doing so will result in great loss to others and to yourself. Because I said yes didn't mean that I wasn't still uncertain. My heart would break every time we sang this ocean song at church. You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery. In oceans deep my faith will stand. And I call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves when oceans rise. My soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours and you are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fears surround me, you've never failed me, and you won't start now. One morning while I was getting ready for work, I said, Lord, I just don't know. Please give me another sign that this is really your will, or am I just being crazy? And almost audibly, I heard the Lord say to me, how many signs do you need? I burst into tears and I said, no more, Lord. And from that day forward, it was sealed in my heart that I was going, and I knew that I knew that I knew I was going. Luke 9:23, and he was saying to them all, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. When the Lord calls you to something, you must know deep inside that you are definitely being called. The questions in your mind had better be settled, because if you haven't settled them in your own mind, that little voice that keeps talking to you, and you have all your friends going, are you crazy? And others are saying, I think if God's really calling you, he'll give you a husband, Grace. Well, that didn't happen. So, you better know that you have heard, and you've got it settled, because there's so many who are going to question what you're doing. Um, I was 60 years old, single white woman. I once had a well-meaning pastor tell me in a strong voice that he had no witness to what I was doing and that I was not following God's will. Friends who loved me and stuck by me for years said, "Grace, what in the world are you thinking?" My mom was afraid I'd die from Ebola. 2 of my children felt I abandoned them, and it has literally taken years to restore their hearts to me. And those are miracles too. I could tell you stories after stories of how God moved and caused them to like me again. But there were others who stood with me and prayed with me and even supported me financially. Tim and Beth Kobernick, they were here about 3-4 weeks ago, my friends from the other side of the state. They supported me $100 a month for 5.5 years. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I have dear friends in Oklahoma. They're very wealthy, but they supported me $300 a month for 5.5 years and sent me $5,000 to buy my first car. And during a big cholera outbreak, sent $4,000 to aid for the cholera outbreak. So, and I never would have known that couple from Oklahoma if I had not gone to Honduras way back when I was 25 years old. That's where I met her, was when we went to Honduras together. So the Lord is working all the time. So I arrived alone in an unknown country with unknown people and really no clear plan. Looking back, I know I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. I'd finally made it to Africa. Zambia was known as Northern Rhodesia from 1911 to 1964. It is a country in southern Africa, roughly the size of Texas, a landlocked country bordered by 8 other countries: Angola, Botswana, Congo, Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia. That was the one you asked me. It was Zambia, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. Zambia also shares the Victoria Falls border with Zimbabwe. One of the 7 natural wonders of the world, the Zambezi River is generally in full flood in March, April, and May after the rainy season. My poor little mother, she's 88 years old. She comes to Zambia to stay with me for 6 weeks, and we drive all the way down to the falls so she can see the falls. I hadn't really thought about it. We went in December. She got to see dry cliffs because there were little trickles here and there, and I kept holding up my phone saying, "This part right here, this is what it looks like when there's water, Mom." But anyway, it was what it was. It's 1.5 times wider than the Niagara Falls, and it's twice the height, making it the biggest curtain of water in the world. Locally, it's called Mosi Otunya, or the smoke that thunders. Huge columns of spray can be seen rising into the air from miles away. My boss, Reverend Mutombo, he said, "Yeah, we needed the white people to come from England to tell us that it was called Victoria Falls. All those years we called it Mosi Otunya. We never knew we were saying it wrong." Zambia is still one of the poorest countries in the world, with 60% of the population living below the poverty line and 40% of those in life and death poverty. They don't eat daily. They lose their children to starvation and disease. School is free through the 6th grade, but parents must pay school fees, pay for school uniforms, and buy paper and pencils. If you're not eating every day, those are the last things you will buy, and so your children won't go. After 6th grade, school is expensive. Most Zambians live without indoor plumbing. China pretty much owns the whole country now. It's known for its copper mines. Most of those are owned by China. The precious gems mines, most of those are owned by China now. While I was there living in the city of Lusaka, I think they built like 15, I don't know how many, 15 or so malls just in the time I was there. And they built roads and they put in infrastructure that hooked up to nothing and went nowhere. And they're buying the country slowly, bit by bit. Are the pictures moving forward? Or is that the only one showing? Yeah, they're supposed to go forward. They didn't go, huh? Oh well. I'm not very techo, so if it didn't work, it didn't work. The country has an overwhelming issue with outdoor toilet contamination into the water supply. During the rainy season, cholera is always on the rise. In 2017, I would come home every year for 6 weeks to try to raise money and speak in a whole bunch of churches to raise a little bit more money to go back with. In 2017, I heard that they were having a cholera outbreak while I was here, but when I got there, I realized how bad it was. I mean, they have one every year, but this one was horrible, and thousands of people died. Cholera is first usually introduced into the water system from a contaminated outhouse, but then it's also passed from person to person. So it's not just everybody has to drink the water. It's once you have cholera, you can pass it to somebody else, person to person. It's not just the water. And so I'd been back about 2 weeks, and I kept thinking, I need to go visit Mr. David. I need to go see Mr. David. I need to tell Mr. David I'm back. I should go see Mr. David. And finally one day I'm like, Lord, I think you want me to go see Mr. David. So I went to the school where he worked, and I wasn't sure I'd find him there because I knew all the schools were closed. But there he was, sitting under the tree with some friends. And I never would have even known it was him, except when he stood up and smiled. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Mr. David, my friend. And he came walking to the car, so excited to see me. Skin and bones. He was always very well kept, very shaven, his hair always perfect, his pants ironed perfectly, and he's skin and bones. His pants are gathered onto him. He has hair and a beard, and so I know that he has nothing because he would never allow himself to be kept that way. So he got in the car and we visited for a while, and finally I said, you're so thin. And he said, Mama, I cannot eat if my children cannot eat. And I said, okay. And so we went to the grocery store and I bought $100 worth of food, which to them is a mountain. And he said, please, we cannot take it to my house till after dark, because his neighbors would have seen that he had food and they would have all come. And so we went to his house as close as I can drive there. I couldn't drive all the way there because it was too bad. And then they just carried it to their house quickly. But I kept thinking, if only I'd gone when I first felt I need to see Mr. David. I need to see Mr. David. But eventually I did go. So my work in Zambia quickly became much more than an office assistant. I was stretched, doing things I never thought possible. James 2:5, listen, my beloved brothers, has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs in the kingdom, which he has promised to those who love him? I was asked to teach a class at a women's conference, and I think this was only the second year I was there, and so as an American, I put together all these notes, and I made outlines, and I printed one off for a whole bunch of people who might come, and because I was nervous, and that was out of my comfort zone, and I bought pencils so that they could each have a pencil to take notes with. And I go in there, and the ladies are sitting there, and I said, do we need a translator? And they were all, no, that's okay. So I thought, okay, we're good. They all speak English. And gave them the paper. They were quite excited about the papers. Gave them the pencils. They were very excited about the pencils. And started my little outline, my teaching that was all outlined for them. There was a place for them to take notes. I noticed nobody took notes, but I didn't think too much of it. So then just before it was all done, this lady came in, and she sat down too, and this other woman said something to her in their language, their local language, and she said, oh, you didn't have a translator? And I said, well, I asked. So I had given my whole teaching, and nobody had understood a word I said. And so I'm like, oh, great, And she said, and they want to know if you need to have the paper and pencils back. I said, no, they can keep them. Oh, they were so excited, they got paper and pencil, And I realized most of them didn't even read or write. And I had prepared quite well, So I sat there and I'm just like, well, does anybody have any questions? And she interpreted, and they were like, what is it like to live in America? And I said, oh, it's very nice there, And then someone said, what is your home like? And I said, well, I don't have a home anymore, but I used to have a little house with 2 bedrooms and da-da-da-da. Oh. So the questions kept coming, And we ended up staying there almost 3 hours past the conference time, because then that's when the real conference began. They could not believe that I was a white woman from America and that I wasn't filthy rich walking on gold streets. They were shocked to find out that I had a son addicted to heroin living in the streets, and I had another son that was lost to me, and I didn't know where he was in the world. He's been gone 8 years now. They were shocked to find out that my kids weren't following God and that they were living with people and, being kids. They were shocked to find out that I was divorced. That was a very big shock to them, that I was a missionary and I was divorced. That was a huge deal to them. And so I could identify with them. And we prayed for one another, because they had a son who was addicted to alcohol and would come home drunk and beat his mother up. Or their husband left them so many years ago, and now they've got their kids and their sister who died's kids, and they're raising them, because there's not, they say there's orphanages, but there really kind of isn't. Most people take in the family, or there's street kids. There's lots of street kids that nobody owns. And so they had all their stories, and if I had not gone through what I went through after my husband left, I couldn't have related to them. If I wasn't living my life that I lived, I couldn't have said to them, I understand hunger, I understand no electricity, I understand, I couldn't relate it to them. So, where am I at? I've been asked many times, was I ever fearful? Really, I never really was. Maybe once I can think of. I overheard Reverend Mutombo telling someone who had asked him if I was afraid, and he said, no, that's the problem, she's never afraid. Psalms 57:2-4, I call to God the Most High, to God who supplies my every need. He will answer from heaven and save me. He will defeat my oppressors. God will show me his constant love and faithfulness. I am surrounded by enemies who are like hungry lions for human flesh. Their teeth are like spears and arrows, and their tongues are like sharp swords. We had a work and witness team come for a couple of weeks, and it was really fun to work with Americans and talk American and listen to their American stuff and think how silly you all are, I'm back now, I'm American again. But just thinking, as I'm listening to them, oh my gosh, I sounded like that when I first came to. But it was just fun to be there and work with them. I felt a part of them. They included me, and it was just fun. So they were all outside working and doing some cement work, and the young girls were doing a vacation Bible school. And I'm in my bedroom, and I'm doing work for the office, back at the office, because I'm not at the office. And I'm on my computer, and you only have so much electricity per day, so you got to do it when you got it. And I hear all this commotion, so I come out to see what's going on, and the pastor's wife is freaking out. And I'm like, what is going on? And she's screaming, and finally I understand that there's this guy at the door, so I go to the door, and he's like, please, let me in, they kill me. So I let him in, and she's like, no, throw him out, because then they're all gonna come in here and kill us all. And I'm like, well, I'm not gonna let them kill him. And she's like, no, you should prefer us. We are the ones that are visiting. And I'm like, what? So I still didn't understand what was going on. So what had happened is this guy, it was voting day, and there was a voting booth set out in the pasture somewhere. And this guy was standing at the gate, and he was paying people to vote a certain way. Well, then these other people, self-appointed police, they aren't really police, and they were all drunk. They came driving in with their pickup, and they're probably gonna kill that guy. And so I let him in, and she's freaking out, and I'm yelling, get every white person in this building, get us all in this building. Mr. Peary and Clement, two of the workers there, they were gathering everybody and bringing them in, and Mr. Peary had already been attacked trying to protect this guy, and he was bleeding, and so we get everybody in, and we lock down the grill gates, And then I find out that her husband is not in, the pastor of the church. The pastor of the church was deaf. He became deaf as an adult, so he could speak pretty good, so he was still a pastor. But she had been his ears for years. And so she was, rightfully so, worried and wanting to protect her husband. And she's freaking out. And so I'm telling Mr. Peary and Clement to take this guy down to the other end of the building and hold him there until I tell him what to do with him. And meanwhile, I'm at the grill gate. We've locked the grill gate, put the padlock on so that nobody can come in. And there's these drunk guys standing there. And I'm 5'5", and so I go there, and they're, all, what did I just read? Their tongues are like sharp swords. Wow, could they speak some good American words? And they called me a few choice names, I'll tell you what. And so I'm like, who do you think you are? I don't even know what all I said, but I just let them have it. And they kind of backed off a little bit. I could tell they were surprised. And then they said, we're coming tonight. We know you're here. We're going to come tonight. We're going to kill you all. And I said, thank you. Then we can go to heaven sooner. And it wasn't really the answer they were looking for. And so I could tell that I just kind of shocked them a little bit. But the one guy, the leader, he just kept trying and calling me all these names. And I finally said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. These people are godly people, come to this country to serve you. And I rebuke your mouth, and I'm telling you to shut up. And he goes, oh. And he shut up. So, and the meanwhile, my kneecaps are starting to shake. And I'm like, and so then we go down, we discuss with the man who's going to be killed what we should do with him, and he finally agrees that he has to go because he's putting us all in danger. And so he does go out, and they put him in the pickup, and they drive him off. But later, in the dark, they came back. And I know it wasn't to intimidate us. So I made up a huge plate of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I made up all these little glasses of punch, and I took them out to him, and I said, I know you haven't had anything all day. I know you're hungry here. And they just looked at me like, you are the craziest person we've ever seen. And they ate their food and left. And we never saw them again. But what happened was interesting. The white people in the Work and Witness team were very angry with me. They felt that I had not protected them. And they were all scared. They didn't understand, And so I became outside the group. And it was very uncomfortable to be outside of the group when I wanted to be included in their American group, And a couple days later, we always take Work and Witness teams to this village. I hate it because I feel like they're on display, like they're at the zoo, and we're all looking at them, But we walk through the village, and they pray for people, and they get to see what village life is like. And so I'm hanging way back, and I'm just kind of walking along behind all of them, and nobody wants to walk with me, and feeling bad. And so there's these three guys sitting up on a log, and they're obviously drunk, and one of them yells, hey, mama, you come talk to us. And I don't know where I get this stuff from. I know it's the Lord. I said, hey, you come talk to me. And they were like, oh, she wants us to come talk to her. And they don't know what to do, So finally, one of them gets up and comes down and asks for money. And I said, I don't have any money. And I said, what are you doing here? And he goes, oh, I'm looking for work. And I said, well, where do you live? Lived all the way in Lusaka, which was an hour away, which is the town I lived in. And I said, so what are you doing out here if your wife and children are in Lusaka? When was the last time you saw him? Oh, months ago. I said, so you're just like every other husband around here who just deserts his wife and children and expects her to take care of them. He's like, oh, mama, it's not like that. And so we go back up to where all the other two drunk guys are, and we're sitting there, and I just jumped all over them. Looking back, I think, who gave me the right to do that? I don't know. But I'm just like, you need to be home with your wives, and you're sitting here drinking the money that you could be feeding your children or sending them to school, and you're smoking those cigarettes, and all of that money could be given to your wives and your children. You need to go home. You need to leave here. What are you doing here? I just let them have it, and they were like, oh. And so one of them said, are you a Christian? And so I said, yeah, I'm a Christian. And he says, me too, Mom. And I said, then go home to your wife and read the Bible to your wife. Mom, I can't read. I said, well, then whatever you need to do, go home to your wife. And he goes, will you pray for me? And I said, yeah, I'll pray for you. So I went over and laid hands on him and prayed for him, and he began weeping. And the other two got big eyes and just kind of sat there like, what the heck's going on? And these little old ladies came out of their grass hut homes, and they were standing around watching me, and you pray for me also, Mama, you pray for me also. So I ended up gathering them all together, prayed for all of them, and the work and witness team that I'm supposed to be chaperoning is way over there now, and they haven't seen any of this. And so one of the ladies said, Mama, I need a Bible. And I said, can you read? And she said, yes, because there's no sense giving them a Bible if they can't read, because it's just for status, and they sit in church with it upside down looking important, you know. So a few weeks later, I went to church, or I went back to town, and I drove all the way out there by myself and went up, and I couldn't find the lady, but I gave away 3 Bibles. But if I hadn't been prepared by what happened when those guys were so abusive and going to kill us, I don't think I ever would have said anything to those 3 guys on the log. I would have just kind of looked at them and kept going, you know. But I think that prepared me to be able to stand and to pray for those guys, you know. My call is no different than your call. The Lord calls us all to be like him, to be ambassadors for Christ. We are all to be missionaries. We are all to love and serve everyone the Lord brings across our path, with an earnest desire to seek and save the lost. It is not the pastor's job. His job is to shepherd the sheep. Who are the sheep? We are the sheep. When was the last time you prayed with, or at least prayed for, someone who lives daily without the Lord? Do we honestly love the lost? Do we actively seek relationships with the lost? It is relationship that will bring the people to Christ, not religion. 1 John 2:5-6 says, by this we know that we are in him. The one who says he abides in him ought himself to walk in the same manner as he walked. To the concern and embarrassment of disciples, Jesus was always making friends with sinners. He asked Matthew, a tax collector, to become one of his disciples. He ate with Gentiles, he spoke with prostitutes, and generally he did not act like a Jewish teacher. He stirred up the religious people. As a follower of Jesus, we are to be like him. We ought to walk as he walked. We should stir things up everywhere we go. Matthew 9:35-38. And Jesus went throughout all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Because of the lost, they're future sheep without a shepherd. They don't have anyone. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Jesus wasn't looking at the harvest in another country. He was looking at the harvest before him. He was looking at the people, the crowds who were lost, and he had compassion on them. He said to ask earnestly how to reach our neighbors, our co-workers, our families, so that we may be sent out into the harvest. Who are your neighbors? Who are my neighbors? This week I prayed with my Mormon chiropractor, whose wife has cancer. His family and are my neighbors in my life right now, and I've been praying for them for weeks. But this week was the first time I actually prayed with him. And when I was done praying with him, he was crying. So I meant to just pray a little, Lord bless him, blah, blah, blah. That was it. But then God came in the room, and I ended up praying stuff that touched his heart and changed him, I'm hoping. Our neighbors, the harvest, are our future brothers and sisters in Christ. If we love them, we will pray for them. We will labor for their adoption into the kingdom family. Choose today to build a relationship with the neighbor that God brings you. Earlier I asked if there were any missionaries here today. But you know what? You're all missionaries. If we're all missionaries and we're missionaries for life, this is a lifelong mission trip that we're on. And so, if anybody ever says to you again, are there missionaries here? Raise your hand, because you are missionaries. Are my 30 minutes up yet? Okay. I was trying to talk fast because I had a lot of pages. So I just wanted to open it up for question and answers. If you have questions, a lot of times that leads to stories. So does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I just wanted to add to your last statement there that one of the largest missionary fields in the world today is the United States.
Yep. Yes, it's true. When I would tell Zambians, we need you to come to our country. We need you to save your money and come and be missionaries in America. I said, you guys are way more a Christian nation than we are. Oh, no. I said, yes. But you have a constitution. It doesn't matter. It's being torn apart. And we need missionaries in America. And they're like, they didn't know what to think about that. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you always preach with no shoes?
Well, the deal is I've had 4 surgeries on my feet, and every time I wear dress shoes, they just kill me. So on Sunday mornings, I generally get here in dress shoes, and that's it.
You did very good, dear.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
Well, I just had a comment. That whole situation at the gate when you confronted them and then loved them later, well, that disarmed them, because usually what happens when people are aggressive, they expect aggressive
Back.
So the most powerful thing you can do is what you did.
Yeah.
It seems to me that when you step out in faith, it feeds courage and it feeds faith. So later you can do the long
Yeah.
with the 3 men. And so that's something for us all to remember. It's one thing to believe, it's another thing to act upon it, which is critical, because then they cement each other in our lives.
Yeah, and if the Lord had given me chance to think about being courageous, I might not have been so courageous. But it just happened, ding, 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 and I didn't have a chance to think, and I just reacted. And I did go to the police chief a week later and ask about that man, and he was beaten up by the time he got there, but he did live. He was alive, so they didn't kill him on the way. So I felt like, oh, I saved his life, maybe. I don't know. Yes?
What is the actual day you're leaving again?
I'm leaving March 5th, and I'm going there for 3 weeks, and then I'm going to South Carolina to visit my new granddaughter who's 8 months old that I've never met yet, and then I'll be back here on the 5th, so in April. I'll be in Zambia for 3 weeks. Yeah. And I'm not going to do missions or anything. I'm just going to see my friends who I miss horribly. So, yes.
You know, of course, when you go over there, it's more than likely the Lord is going to have you do something.
Yeah.
I know they are. I already know. There's a conference going on while I'm there, and I was really excited because that means all the district superintendents from Malawi and Zimbabwe will be there. Otherwise, there would be no way I would be able to see everybody. I can't do that. And so I'm excited that the conference is happening while I'm there, and I'll be able to see everybody that I've worked with, and that's going to be exciting. But I already kind of figure Reverend Mutombo is going to say, Grace, you just go speak, you know. When I first got there and those would happen, I would just be scared to death. What am I going to say? I'm not prepared. But as time went on, I got better and better. When the first year when I came home, they said to me, so when you're home, you can do deputation. And I said, okay, what's deputation? I don't know what that is. And they're like, oh, you go to all the churches and speak. I'm like, oh, no, not me. I'm not going. That's not me. That's not what I do, you know. And they're like, no, you will. You will go to all the, okay, I will. And the first couple of churches, I was scared to death. But by about the 5th or 6th one, I'm like, this is kind of fun. I kind of like this. I never knew I would like it, you know. So after years of being very, very quiet, I suddenly became a loudmouth. So, yes.
I was just going to say, you know,
Yeah.
like bringing sandwiches. Um, just, it just completely disarms those
Yes,
people.
yes.
Yep.
When I was in Honduras on a mission trip down there, I was down there for 3 weeks in a big city in Honduras, which is known as the murder capital
Tegucigalpa.
of the world. Yeah,
I was there for 3 months.
yeah, and there would be street gangs, kids with rifles, guns that would, and so you always try to stay in and avoid them and everything. And this one day they happened to be out by the compound where we were staying, and so I just took water bottles out, and from
Yeah.
then on I was allowed free passage, and I didn't really have a lot, I couldn't really understand them, and they couldn't understand me too good, but they did understand the act.
Yeah. There's a big roundabout near my apartment that I drove around every day to go to the office, and the street boys were always out there. And there was this little guy, and the little ones get picked on by the big boys so badly. And so he had no shoes, and it was winter. I think it was June, middle of June. It was very, very cold. And so he's standing on one they don't call what do they call them now? Flip-flops. He would stand on one flip-flop like this, then he'd switch to the other foot, and then he'd switch it back and forth, And I thought, I'm going to buy him a pair of shoes, which only cost me about $5. So I went and got him a pair of shoes, and I got him a pair of socks. And so when I came back around the roundabout to go back home, I motioned him to come to the car. Well, he's scared to death. He probably thought I was going to kidnap him. But I told him, leave the door open, leave the car door open, and sit down. And we didn't know what socks were, so I had to show him what those were. And so he put those on, and then he put the shoes on, and then he was walking like this, feeling how it felt to have. It was probably his first pair of shoes. So then I would see him for a couple of more days, and he, hi, Mama, you're so glad to see me, And then I didn't see him anymore. And so I thought, I wonder where he went. Then, I don't know, a week or two later, I saw him again, no shoes. So I called him over to the car, and I said, where are your shoes? He goes, Mama. I'm meeting the need of the feet, but he needs to eat every day. And that's what I saw so many times. Americans would come and have no clue how to help, and that's what I was doing too. I was helping, but not in a good way. I mean, I thought I was helping. I guess it did give him money when he sold them, but, Mama. I just remember that. So, anybody else? Any more?
So what is, like, if you go on a church or a mission, what is the big mistake you make? Like, who do you see them, the Americans?
The Americans? Well, when they would come, work and witness teams would come, they always wanted to do Vacation Bible School with the kids, which is a good idea. But they want to do American Vacation Bible School. They want to do crafts. And so they're making things that their parents have no access to. So when it goes home, it immediately becomes the parents. Those shoe boxes that Americans fill and send all over the world? They got there in, I don't know, July or August or something, and nobody had a clue that they were for Christmas. I mean, I didn't know what they were for, so they just, the place that the boxes arrived, the adults went through and took out everything that they wanted and then boxed it up and realized, oh, it's supposed to go to kids. So they gave it to the kids, and those kids took their boxes home, and those parents said, oh, I want this and this, and so the parents took that. And I think about the things that I used to put in those boxes really had very little meaning to them, and certainly did not mean a Christmas gift. They don't do Christmas gifts. One time this guy, I picked him up and I gave him a ride home, and it was Christmas Day, and it was a Christmas day. It was the only time I did this. I spent the whole day all by myself, crying and feeling very sorry for myself. Because, well, the whole time I was there for 5.5 years, I never had a Christmas present or a birthday present, So this particular Christmas, I was all by myself. And so from then on, I always made sure that I went out of town and went somewhere and took somebody with me, and we had a great time. It meant I had to pay for everything, but that was okay. Anyway, I picked this guy up, and I took him home. And he was rolled down the window and had his arm out so that all of his neighbors would see that he was riding in a car, you know. and I dropped him off, and I said, "What's your family doing today, you know, for Christmas?" And they were holding an all-day prayer meeting at their house that day with the pastor and some of the church members, all the people who didn't have food for the day were all meeting, and they were praying and fasting for the day at the house. And that's what they were doing for Christmas. See, we have no understanding of that kind of Christmas. I had a little tree about this big that I would always put on my dining room table, and I gave it to the gal that was my housekeeper. Here I'm a one person, but I hired a housekeeper, and I put 2 of her kids through school. But anyway, so I gave her the tree to take home, and I said, I'm thinking I'm giving her a Christmas tree. And I said to her, did your kids like it? And she goes, oh, they say pretty flower. Because they don't have a clue what it is, you know. And I'd been there, 4 or 5 years. By then, I'm still messing up, you know. So there's all those little things that we just take for granted because they're part of our culture and our life that don't happen there. So, any other questions? Okay, I did want to ask that, you know, some of you guys to come up and if you want to come for prayer. But there's 2 things I wanted to talk to you about. If you feel like there's a specific call on your life, like I felt for 40 years that God had called me to Africa, but never had any idea how I was going to get there, or finally decided I was nuts and I'd missed it altogether. But if you feel like there's a specific call of God on your life and you're waiting to see it be birthed, I want you to come forward for prayer this morning. Or if you want to serve him and you don't feel like there's a call in your life and you want to hear a specific call, I want you to come forward this morning for prayer as well. There's nothing better than knowing what God wants you to do, even if you don't understand what it is he wants you to do, or how you're going to happen, or all those reasonings that we want to know. It's still the main call on everybody's life is to be a missionary. That's your first and foremost call. So